record. Governor Charlie Baker is our guest this morning. Let's go on the record. He's weathered many storms, from nor'easters to COVID-19, and now we're in the home stretch of a busy 2021. From vaccines to billions in stimulus aid, there is so much to talk about this morning. Let's get to it and go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter, Jenna Wu. It's great to have you with us. Great to have the governor of the Commonwealth with us as well. Governor Charlie Baker is sitting in the chair this morning. As you know, we'll run through the particulars. He's a Republican and took office as the Commonwealth's 72nd governor back in 2015. A resident of Swampscott, he also served in the administration of Bill Weld as Secretary of Administration and Finance and Secretary of Health and Human Services. He holds degrees from Harvard and Northwestern. It's great to have you with us, Governor. Thank you so much.
It's good to be here.
So a lot happened this past week, including the fact that children between 5 and 11 are now eligible for the vaccine. And a lot of parents who were like first in line to get the vaccine, couldn't wait, are hesitating about giving it to their kids, their younger kids. What do you say to them to convince them that it's safe and you should do it as soon as possible?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is talk to your child's pediatrician, talk to your doctor. We actually made the announcement about the beginning of the eligibility process at Children's Hospital and had several pediatricians with us to talk about it. I think in many ways these are always decisions people need to make, and they're important, and we certainly believe the data supports it. If you look at almost all the data that's out there so far, not just here in Massachusetts, but around the country and around the world, places that have high vaccination rates have low case counts, low hospitalizations, and lower deaths. And that is the end game here.
And if your kids were that age, you would definitely have them vaccinated right away.
Oh, sure. And I know my pediatrician would be recommending that they be vaccinated as well. But the best and most important thing you can do if you have any concerns on this is you should talk to your doctor.
But you can appreciate the delicate balance that parents have. Maybe for themselves it's one thing, but for their children it's another set of thinking and circumstances and thought process.
Totally.
Yeah. And
completely get it. Look, my kids are 30, 27, and 24, and day doesn't go by that my wife and I don't think about them. And they're up out of the house on their own and all the rest, but they're still ours. Mm-hmm. And when your kids are young, I completely understand that. But again, if people talk to the doctors who they trust to help them make the best decisions they can for their kids, I think most of the time, almost all the time, those doctors are going to say that this is safe and effective and you should do it.
So let's talk about where we are now. Right now, over 90% of state workers have complied with the vaccine mandate?
Yeah, it's somewhere between 90 and 95, depending upon how you count some of the folks who are going through the exemption process. Yeah. But it's basically around 40,000 to 42.
But of course, there are things to talk about. Police and prison guard unions are suing. So are the majority of those union members not complying with the mandate? Is that where they are? Is that the bottom line, to your knowledge?
On the state police piece, I'm pretty sure the members of that union are north of 90. And I'm pretty sure the members of the correctional union are north of 85. And there are people going through the exemption process who are getting vaccinated as they go through that process right now. There are 12,000 people who got vaccinated who work for state government and the executive branch, who got vaccinated after we put the mandate in place. That took us from about a 70% compliance rate up to about a 94, 95, somewhere in there, percent compliance rate. And people are continuing to get vaccinated. And I fully expect that by the end of this, we'll have almost everybody. I would love to have everybody, but I think we're going to be pretty close to everybody.
Will you fire those who aren't?
Well, some people have left voluntarily. I don't know the exact number. I think it's around 100. And there are a handful who basically said, I'm not going to get vaccinated. Ever, period.
And will you fire them if they actually won't?
We have. Okay. We've asked them to leave.
Yeah. So you're not afraid to fire people. I want to switch the conversation over to the AARP money. Since last summer, you've wanted to start spending $5 billion in federal pandemic money. The House and Senate insist on having a say, but they're still quibbling about the details of the whole thing. Are we wasting a lot of time that could be put into dealing with climate change, dealing with housing, which usually takes a long time to get up and running?
Well, I certainly respect and appreciate the legislature. It's a big sum of money, and I certainly appreciate their interest in participating participating and making decisions about this. But, you know, we filed our proposal, which was to spend about half of it back in May. And honestly, some of the stuff I wish we had started spending. I wish we'd started spending some of the money on job training and skill building and credentialing, because we have a lot of people whose jobs probably went away as a result of the pandemic, and we would like to help them find the next job. But let's face it, this is the process we're in. This is how democracy and deliberative government works. I will say this, you know, if you look at what the House and the Senate have done, many of the elements of what they're proposing are reasonably consistent with the stuff we were looking for back in May. Now, you could say, well, then why didn't you just... Sure, I get that. But
right.
The flip side of that is they had hearings, they had people in, and a lot of the things that we talked about are part of the proposals in one branch or the other. The one place where I wish they had a little more appetite in the direction we do is around some of this environmental infrastructure, which is an enormous problem. It's a must-do, and it's critical to the future of the Commonwealth, and it continues to be one of those things that I can't seem to get anybody to focus on.
So in addition to getting turkey on Thanksgiving, do you think you'll get this bill?
Yes, I do. I believe both the Senate President and the House Speaker have both committed to each other and to us that we'll get this bill by the time the formal session ends, which is November 17th.
So let's go through a couple of items quickly, and a couple of things that are important bubbled to the surface during the Boston mayor's race, and they were kind of in the headlines for a while. Should some sort of rent control be allowed in certain cities and towns in Massachusetts? What do you think?
Well, my answer was, I got asked about this before, and I said probably not, that I won't support it, okay? Yep. And the reason I said probably not instead of just no, I mean, I voted against rent control when it was on the ballot. I was personally able to see the unfairness of it when I was a younger guy living in the city. But I'm not going to write off the notion that there might be some way to do something about the high cost of housing here in the Commonwealth. I will say this, we proposed $1 billion in spending on housing in our original proposal back in May, including $300 million for first-time home buyers, $200 million for our Commonwealth Builder Program, which is a home building and buying program, and hundreds of millions of dollars for senior housing, workforce housing, and supported housing for people with disabilities. We need all of that and then some. And my big worry about price controls is price controls usually mean shortages. And I want to go hard into the place I think is our biggest problem on housing, which is we don't have enough. And because we don't have enough, the price of everything goes up. And we are losing a lot of young people to other parts of the country where they can find it. And we desperately need to build more housing.
What about a free tea?
Is it realistic to think that there could ever be a free tea?
There is no such thing as a free tea. There's no such thing as a free lunch, okay?
Free fares,
remember,
no fares.
Just remember that, you know, the taxpayers of Massachusetts, none of whom ride the T, pay about $1 billion a year to support its operation because we think that's a public good and we should do that. But I think when we ran our fare bases against the fare bases of the transit systems around the rest of the country, they're affordable and competitive. And I think the biggest thing we need to do, which we've been working on, is invest in the system. When we took office, people were spending, you know, less than $600 million a year on the capital program.
So a fare-free tea is not realistic in your mind?
Somebody's going to have to come up with a lot of money from somebody. And I do think if the city of Boston's willing to pay to give free tea to the residents of the city of Boston, that's certainly worth a conversation, I suppose. But I don't see a reason why you would expect people who live on the Cape, on the North Shore, in Central or Western Mass, who will never be anywhere near the tea, except on very rare occasions, why they should pay to give everybody in Boston a free ride does not make any sense to me.